Her feet touched the earth without protection when they led her forward. Years of toiling under relentless skies had painted her skin with layers of grime that seemed permanent, weathered, and worn like ancient leather. She wore no head covering. No wrap for her shoulders, only a dress bleached colorless by countless suns, shapeless from wear, and carried herself with the kind of quiet that made even the rowdiest men avert their eyes. They bound her wrists with weathered rope, treating her no differently than livestock. She offered no struggle, showed no emotion, simply maintained her posture with dignity while the gathered crowd pressed closer, some driven by morbid fascination, others by casual cruelty. The man calling the auction shuffled meaningless documents and projected his voice over the oppressive afternoon heat. 19 years old, healthy, no illness on record, capable of extended labor whether in fields or household duties, and obedient. Someone in the crowd snickered. A lady dressed in deep purple fabric whispered harsh judgments. Another woman frantically waved her fan despite the still air. The young woman remained silent. Near the saloon entrance, her mother slouched against the wooden railing, arms folded, mouth set in a bitter line as if fighting back venom. Her gaze held the hardness that comes from whiskey and broken dreams. The way she regarded her own childlike discarded farm equipment cut more deeply than the scorching sun. "She's not valuable," her mother shouted, words slurred with drink. "I'm done providing for her. Take her today and she's your problem." The murmurs began then. Whispered stories about the girl from beyond the dried creek bed, rumors of failed escapes with traveling merchants. No family except the woman eager to dispose of her like wilted flowers. Never once spotted smiling, the auctioneer continued without pause, scanning the crowd. "Who wants this girl? She labors without complaint, requires little, never makes demands." Initially, no hands rose. Several men glanced her way before looking elsewhere. A merchant chuckled and declined with a headshake. One young man made crude comments about damaged goods before his mother silenced him with a sharp elbow. The girl studied the dirt as if expecting nothing. Nothing was all she'd ever known. Then movement stirred from the crowd's edge. A towering figure in a weathered brown coat materialized. No one had witnessed his arrival. He rested against the blacksmith's fence post, hat pulled low, steady hands visible. Road dust covered his boots, not fresh, but accumulated from distant travels. Someone whispered recognition. "That's the widower from the southern ridge. Heard he lost his cattle herd. Has no help remaining." Probably just observing, but observation wasn't his purpose. He stepped forward deliberately, raising one hand in a subtle gesture that shattered the silence like gunfire. "I'll claim her," he stated, not loudly or softly, but with unwavering certainty. The auctioneer blinked in surprise. "You'll take her?" He nodded once. "She's yours to dispose of?" The mother scoffed. "She's mine to get rid of." The man approached, extending a modest sum, neither fortune nor bargain, simply sufficient payment. He didn't immediately cut her bonds, instead studying her carefully. She avoided his gaze, focusing on the rope, her raw wrists, the ground beneath. Her feet. He produced a small blade, moving with deliberate care to sever the rope. She didn't flinch at his proximity. He maintained respectful distance. "Are you injured?" he inquired. She shook her head negatively. "Do you have a name?" Silence was her only response. "Doesn't matter," he said, stepping back. "There's a wagon. Prepared. You can come or remain, your decision." For one suspended moment, she remained motionless. The crowd held its collective breath. Then she descended from the platform, her legs nearly buckling from weakness. She steadied herself without assistance. He didn't offer his arm but matched her slow pace with patience. Together they departed the square under countless watching eyes. No one attempted to stop them. At the wagon's simple wood construction with a restless mule, he assisted her into the back, offered a water vessel, then said nothing more. The town disappeared behind them into dust, heat, and judgment. She asked no questions about their destination, spoke no words, but drank the water as if it were sacred. For the first time in memory, she allowed herself to truly breathe. The trail extended like a ribbon of quiet. Afternoon transformed to amber, then gold, then twilight. Shadows emerged from the grassland, clinging to the wagon wheels. He drove without urgency while she sat watching the road disappear behind them. No tears, no terror, just a silence too heavy for someone her age to carry. When the mule halted, lavender had claimed the sky. In the distance stood a weathered house leaning slightly sideways, flanked by a dying oak and an ancient barn. "This is home," he announced. She offered no response. A lit lantern helped her down. "Kitchen's through there. Your room is upstairs. Are you hungry?" She declined with a head shake. "Are you clean?" Another nod. He opened the door, holding it open. Inside carried scents of cedar and ash, no decorative lace. No ornamental touches, just worn wooden floors, rough furniture, and a single faded photograph mounted above the fireplace. "You don't know anything about me," he said. "I understand," she replied, her voice thin and dry. He indicated the staircase. "Top of the steps, left door." She ascended without closing the door behind her. He didn't follow. Morning found her already at the wash basin cleaning dishes. "It's not required," he told her. Without turning, she responded, "I don't mind the work." They shared breakfast in silence, no questions or casual conversation. She observed his slight limp. He noticed her startled reaction when Wynne slammed the door shut. Later, when she attempted to sweep the porch, the broom handle snapped. He repaired it without comment. She folded towels into perfect squares, keeping her voice contained. When night brought cold, he left a shawl draped over the banister, never instructing her to wear it. Days passed this way, not with drama, but with gentle quiet, a silence not empty but expectant. She noticed his ritual of feeding the mule first always, how he touched the fence post like greeting an old friend, how he bid good night at the same time each evening even when she never reciprocated. He observed her reaction to thunder, how she peeled bread before eating, how she lingered outside past sunset, gazing at the horizon as if it might offer something better. One evening she asked, "What made you choose me?" He didn't answer immediately, pouring coffee into 2 cups and offering her one. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, because nobody else did. She stared at the cup, steam curling between her fingers. "You could have selected someone more attractive," she whispered. He didn't react. "Didn't need attractive." "What did you need?" He looked toward the barn. "Someone who wouldn't abandon me." She said nothing more that night, but the following evening she didn't position herself so far away. The girl with dust-covered ankles had arrived at a house that asked no questions, and the man with nothing remaining had just created space for something he hadn't expected to preserve. Neither believed in hope, but that porch under the bruised purple sky held 2 chairs, and for the first time, both were occupied. She awakened to unexpected light filtering through muslin curtains, gentle and soft as though trying not to startle. The bed creaked as she sat up, half expecting demands, shouts, or orders. None came. Downstairs, the house moved at its own rhythm. Floorboards groaned familiar patterns. Somewhere a kettle hummed quietly. The rancher was already working. Outside, she arranged the quilt over the mattress as she always had, edges tight, corners precise like military standards. Habit from a life where order meant survival. The kitchen still held last night's bread aroma. A note lay on the table in masculine handwriting. "Coffee's ready. I'm in the barn. Feeds in the trough if you're willing." No signature, no instructions. Beyond essentials. She read it twice before folding it into her apron pocket. Something strange occurred then. Her perpetually tense shoulders relaxed slightly, as if someone had loosened the cord inside her. Outside, morning was peaceful. The kind of peace that didn't press down, but welcomed. She followed his footprint trail toward the barn, each impression deep and deliberate. As though their maker carried burdens he never discussed, he continued working without looking up, hammering a warped hinge into position. Sunlight slipped through wooden slats and golden bands. Dust floated between them like ancient spirits. "I can assist," she offered. He didn't pause in his work. "Are you certain?" She nodded. "I understand labor." He gestured toward the hay. "Spread it if you'd like. Fresh bedding is stacked by the wall." No comment about her sleep, no questions about her past, just space. That was his way. They worked together for hours, him mending a broken stall door, her shoveling and sweeping, the air between them light and unspoken. A rhythm began forming, not quite harmony, but not discord either. Simply two people doing what they knew. By midday, perspiration had curled hair strands down her neck. She didn't request water. He handed her a tin cup wordlessly. She drank, returned it, their fingers making contact. It meant nothing. It meant everything. Later, she stood by the fence, arms resting on the top rail, watching wind stir the grass like a mother stroking a child's hair. He came to stand beside her quietly. "Did you build all this?" she asked. He nodded once. "Most of it. Why?" He stared ahead. "Because it needed doing, and I was still here." She didn't ask for explanation, didn't need one. That evening she prepared carrots while he brought firewood. The kitchen air thickened with stew's scent and crackling logs. The house no longer felt completely hollow, just paused like a song, awaiting its next verse. She began noticing things. How he placed boots side by side at the door, how he never slammed cabinets, how his calloused, cracked hands could move with such gentleness. He noticed things too, how she turned her face toward warmth like she'd been cold for years, how she always chose the cracked plate and smaller portion, how she listened more than spoke, as though words had once caused her pain. The next morning brought a folded cloth on the table, a hand-stitched apron, not fine but thoughtful. She traced the hem like it was gold. By the third day, she knew his porch footstep patterns. He recognized her humming while peeling apples. They spoke little, but silence was no longer empty. It overflowed with things that didn't require words. Yet, ghosts lingered. He passed a narrow hallway door each night without touching it. She noticed his darkening eyes when he saw it, how his jaw tightened momentarily. Once she reached for the doorknob, it was locked. Later she questioned him about it. Used to be her room, he said without names or explanations. She didn't press. That night in bed, she considered all the rooms where she'd been imprisoned, ones with boarded windows, ones where words like property and payment hung in the air like smoke. Now here she was, free to leave yet too uncertain. To move, midweek brought sudden rain, as if the sky had finally decided it couldn't hold itself together. She stepped outside, lifting her face to the downpour, letting it soak her completely, baptizing the parts of her that still believed she had value. He watched from the porch, dry and still. Then he removed his coat, walked over, and draped it across her shoulders. She didn't say thank you. Didn't need to. He didn't pull away. That night they didn't eat in silence. She told him about the first field she'd ever worked, how her hands bled that day and nobody noticed. He told her about a foal born prematurely, how he stayed awake 3 nights nursing it only to watch it die anyway. They didn't weep, but something softened between them like thaw beneath snow. Still, neither reached out. Neither dared name what was growing, but both knew it was there. The next day, town sent word. A neighbor had spotted her. "The auction girl," they whispered. A man arrived offering coin to take her off his hands. Assuming she was temporarily borrowed, something to be returned, the rancher didn't respond with violence. He simply said, "She's under my protection. You'll leave now." That night she asked, "Why do they despise me?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, "Because you remind them of something they lack courage to face, that they'd trade a daughter for coin, that they'd let it happen and laugh." She looked at him, seeing something in his expression that made her feel less alone. "I'm not damaged," she said quietly. "I know, I'm just wary." "I know that too." Then they sat on the porch again, not close but not distant. And the house, old and aching, breathed again, just once. A long exhale. That night she left the door between their rooms slightly open, not as invitation but as trust. He noticed but didn't cross the threshold. Not yet, they weren't ready for that. But the floor between them no longer felt like an ocean. And that was enough for now. The sky was already heavy when they prepared the wagon. Clouds bloated and bruised hovered above the ridge like something waiting to burst. The girl stood at the porch rail, fingers twisted in the shawl he'd left there days ago, watching the distant town as though it might vanish if she blinked. He stepped beside her, pulling on his coat. "Do you still want to go?" She nodded. "We need flour, salt, maybe thread." He nodded back, no lecture, no worry, just quiet agreement. They rode in silence, the road familiar now, every jolt absorbed in their bones. She sat straighter than before. He noticed that. And she noticed he checked her hands when he passed her the reins, as if wanting to ensure the calluses were healing. When they reached town, the wind had shifted. People noticed them this time, not just glances, but stares lasting longer than decency permitted. "She's the one," someone murmured. "That auction girl." They walked side by side into the general store, the bell above the door ringing once. Echoing too long, the shopkeeper looked up with a thin smile. "Back for seed, mister?" "No," the rancher said, "just supplies." The girl moved quietly through the aisles, selecting what they needed, measuring sugar with careful fingers. But when she reached for sewing thread, another hand shot out and slapped hers away. "You don't touch anything delicate," said the woman behind the counter, younger than the girl's mother, older than her cruelty should have allowed. "This isn't a brothel's pantry." The girl froze, breath catching halfway to her lungs. The shopkeeper didn't interfere. The rancher stepped forward, slow and steady. "That's enough." The woman huffed. "You're the one who bought her." "What does it matter what she touches?" He said nothing at first, just looked at the girl's hand, redness blooming across the knuckles. Then to the woman, "Speak to her again, and you'll wish I'd raised my voice." They left without the thread. The wagon ride back was quieter than usual. She kept her face turned toward the horizon, hands in her lap. "Sorry," he said finally. She shook her head. "You didn't do it." "Didn't stop it either." Her eyes stung, but she didn't let tears fall. "I'm tired of being looked at like something to scrub off a boot." "You aren't." She turned to him. "Then what am I?" He took his time. "You're what they're afraid to admit they threw away." Rain started. As they crossed the final bend toward the ranch, soft at first like breath, then louder until it struck the canvas top like fists. Thunder cracked across the plains. The mule spooked, wheels skidding in mud. He pulled the reins hard. "We'll have to shelter in the barn." They unhitched quickly, rain soaking through sleeves, skirts, skin. She ran ahead, flinging open barn doors. He stumbled behind, slipping once, catching himself against the frame with a grunt. Inside, the storm roared, wind howling through rafters. Water dripped through cracks in the old roof as it always had. They stood just inside, soaked, panting her. Hair stuck to her neck, his shirt clinging to every scar. "Why did you say that to her?" she asked. "Because it was true." "But you don't know me." "I know enough." She shook her head. "No, you don't. You don't know what I've done, what I've allowed to happen." "I don't need to, but I need you too." He didn't move, let the silence fall between them like rain. "Then tell me." She looked away, took a breath, then another. "I was 15 the first time he offered me to a man." My mother took the coin, said. "I was old enough," said. "This world doesn't give favors to girls who stay soft." She waited for him to flinch, to turn. He didn't. She continued. "I tried to run, got caught, was locked in a shed for 3 days without water. When they let me out, I didn't fight anymore." Her voice cracked. "I stopped counting the men after 6. Still, he didn't speak." She stepped closer, hands shaking. "You bought me, same as them." "Maybe kinder about it, but the same thing." "No," he said. "No, I didn't buy you. I paid to end something." She stared at him. He looked at her the way a man looks at lightning in the distance, afraid of it, but willing to stand there just the same. "I didn't know your story, still don't, but I could see the ending they were writing for you." "And you think you get to change that?" "No, I think you do." The barn creaked under wind and thunder's weight. Then the roof gave a groan. A section near the loft buckled. He looked up just as the beam fell. She shouted. He pushed her aside. The beam struck his shoulder. He fell hard into mud. She scrambled to him, heart hammering. "Don't move." "I'm fine," he rasped. "You're not." She knelt beside him, cradling his head in her lap. Blood seeped through his sleeve. "You're bleeding." "It's not bad." "It is, you're crying." She hadn't realized it. "I didn't want you to get hurt." I'd rather hurt than watch you get dragged back to hell. She blinked, trembling. You said I could change the ending. I believe that. She pressed her forehead to his, then stay alive for it. He chuckled weakly but genuinely. That's a fine order. By morning, the storm had passed. Light returned in cautious golden strips through the rafters. He sat propped against a barrel, bandaged. She brought him coffee, handed it over without words. He took it, their fingers brushing again. This time she didn't pull away. He didn't either. The barn was broken. The house was still standing. So were they? Morning came soft, as if the land itself were holding its breath. Mist clung low across the field like a memory refusing to lift. In the barn, the girl sat cross-legged beside the rancher, both wrapped in the silence that follows. Survival. She held a tin mug, no longer for warmth but for ritual. His bandage was soaked through near the shoulder. He hadn't complained, hadn't asked for help. Still, she brought him water and checked the wound her touch practiced from years of tending others who never thanked her. You should rest in the house, she said. He shook his head. Roof needs patching. You almost died. He looked out the barn door toward pale morning light. Almost isn't the same as did. Her breath caught not at the words but at how calm he was when he said them. She stood, wiped her hands on her apron, then looked at him with the kind of stare a person gives when there's nothing left to hide. I need to leave. He didn't flinch. You can. I'm not saying I want to. I'm saying I need to. I know. Why aren't you stopping me? Because needing to go means you haven't chosen to stay, she swallowed hard. That answer hurt more than expected. He rose slowly, wincing but hiding it, always hiding it. I'll pack the wagon, he said. I wasn't asking for help. I'm not offering it, I'm giving it. By midday, her satchel was packed, not much in it. A few clothes, the thread he'd gone back to town to buy for her, left on her pillow without words, and the apron he'd mended after she'd torn it on a nail. He stood beside the mule, reins in hand, waiting. She stepped down the porch steps and paused. The house behind her loomed larger than ever, not in size but in weight. I should be able to leave without crying, she muttered. You should be able to leave however you need to. She climbed into the wagon. He didn't say goodbye, didn't ask if she'd write. He just nodded and turned back toward the barn, but the mule didn't move. She yanked the reins. Nothing. She tried again. Still nothing. The rancher looked back. He won't go. Why? Because he was born here. And animals know when they're carrying someone who doesn't really want to leave. She stared at the mule, then at the sky, then down at her own trembling hands. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. I thought leaving would make me free, but all I feel is empty. That's because freedom's not about going, it's about choosing. She climbed down, walked toward him, stopped just a few feet away. What if I stayed? She asked. He didn't move. Then I'd have to build a new fence line. She almost laughed. Why? Because it's not just my land anymore. Her voice dropped. Would I be your wife? He looked at her with that same steady expression he'd worn in town, at the auction, in every quiet moment between them. Not unless you want to be. She stepped closer. What if I don't know how to be one? Then we figure it out. He extended his hand on Na's demand, not as claim but as question. And for the first time in her life, she answered one. She placed her hand in his. The wedding happened before the sun dipped behind the ridge. No guests, no preacher, just two hands bound by mutual breath and quiet grace. They stood by the creek behind the house, the water moving slow and golden like time itself had slowed to listen. He asked, You sure? She nodded. I'm not clean. I'm not new. I'm not asking for either. I'm only learning how to be good. I'd be scared of someone who already knew. They didn't kiss then, that would come later. Instead, they built a fire, cooked beans over flame, and she pulled out the old scarf he'd never asked about, the one she'd hidden in the satchel with. The smell of her first home, her worst memory. She threw it in the fire, watched it burn. He didn't ask, but she whispered, It was my mother's. The flame crackled, and then it was gone. Later, he brought her to the porch. handed her a chair he'd sanded clean that morning. She sat. He sat. Beside her, the sky turned amber, then bruised. The last light poured itself across the field like honey on old linen. She turned to him, voice trembling but true. "I think I want to belong here." He looked straight ahead. "Then you already do." She reached out and touched the back of his hand, not softly, not shyly, like she meant it. The wind picked up and carried the scent of pine, ash, earth, and the porch, once a place where silence kept vigil, now held something new, a vow unspoken but real. Before the sun went down, she had not just stayed. She had chosen. And in the choosing, she had changed the shape of her name. The mornings were different now, not because the sun rose any slower or the wind stopped sweeping across the fields, but because she rose with it, with purpose, with breath that didn't shake. She moved through the house like someone claiming it, not with noise, but with hands. She polished the table that had always been dust gray, stitched new curtains for the kitchen, humming soft, tuneless notes while the stew simmered. The house no longer echoed. It answered, he repaired the barn beam slower than in younger years, but steadier somehow. She watched him from the doorway, arms crossed, chin tilted slightly, not to judge, but to memorize. How he limped on the right side. How he tapped each nail twice before striking. How the silence around him was never lonely. They shared the work she milked in the morning. He chopped wood at dusk. And when their fingers brushed passing dishes or tools or the reins to the mule, neither pulled away. Sometimes they spoke. Other times they didn't need to. But the words had changed. And so had the pauses. One morning she found a wooden box on the windowsill, sanded smooth, no latch. She opened it, and inside lay 3 items, a dried wildflower, a blue ribbon, and a folded piece of paper. The handwriting was his. "You're not what they named you. You're what you survived and what you chose." She pressed the note to her chest and let herself cry, not like before. Not from shame or ache, but from recognition. Later that week, a neighbor came by, one of the women who used to glance too long, speak too low. She brought a jar of preserves and asked if the girl might help sew a christening gown for her niece. The girl didn't say yes. She said, "I'd be honored." And just like that, the world shifted, not loudly, but enough. The days passed. One evening, as the wind turned colder and the trees began to rust, he found her sitting on the porch, bare feet resting on the rail. She wore the shawl he'd given her, but differently now, loose, confident. She was staring at the sky like it owed her nothing. He sat beside her, didn't speak. After a while, she turned. "I don't think I could go back." "You don't need to. I mean, not just to that town. I mean to who I was. You buried her," she nodded. "I didn't even say goodbye." Some goodbyes don't need saying. They sat until the sun dipped low and turned everything to fire. That night they lay side by side, not touching but not apart. She whispered in the dark, "I've never felt safe before, not really." He answered without opening his eyes, "That's what a home is." She smiled and turned toward him. "I think I love this house," she said. And it was true, because it wasn't just walls and roof anymore. It was where her name had changed shape, where her worth had been returned piece by trembling piece. The house, like her, had once been silent, holding too many ghosts. Now it breathed. 1 week later they rode into town again, not for supplies, not for apologies, this time for paper. Marriage papers signed in quiet ink, witnessed by no one but the wind. And the dust and the mule that had carried them both. The clerk raised an eyebrow but said nothing. On the way home, she leaned against his shoulder, not out of need, but want. Back at the house, she took off her boots and stepped barefoot through the door. She touched the frame, the wall, the table, like someone remembering what her own skin felt like, and when she turned to him, standing there like he always did, hat in hand, gaze low but warm, she simply said, "Welcome home." He blinked. "It's yours too." That night he took down the faded photograph above the fireplace. He didn't burn it, didn't hide it, simply placed it in a drawer, closed it gently, and opened a space on the wall. She noticed, didn't speak, but later she hung a single stitched cloth in its place, nothing fancy. Just 2 names side by side, and beneath them the word, "Enough." Fall arrived slow and golden. They stacked firewood and canned peaches. She taught him to read cursive. He taught her to patch leather. They argued once about where to plant winter kale, but when the wind held that night, they sat close by the fire and passed the last biscuit between them. They no longer needed permission to take up space. And that was the miracle, because in a world that once auctioned her worth, she had claimed her place. In a house once hollowed by loss, he had learned how to love without fear. She wasn't saved. She rose. He wasn't healed. He chose to stay open anyway. The house finally breathed, not just with life, but with meaning. And if you passed by it today, just past the ridge where the cottonwoods lean, you'd see the porch light glowing even at dusk. You'd hear laughter soft and unforced. You'd see 2 chairs always filled. And maybe, if the wind was right, you'd hear the floorboards sigh like old bones settling into something warm. And perhaps you'd think that some broken things don't need fixing, they just need naming. So here's the naming. These two are not what others called them. They are what they carried, what they chose not to surrender, what they built barefoot and bleeding. And if you're lucky, if you're brave, you might find your own house like that one that learns to breathe again because of you, because of love, and because finally you stayed.